Hello and welcome to the Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's movie is Big Trouble in Little China, the 1986 action adventure that stars Kurt Russell as a truck driver who is pulled into a centuries-old conflict between good versus evil, involving street gangs, magic, and prophecy in underground Chinatown, San Francisco. A genre film that blended Western adventure filmmaking with Eastern martial arts cinema and then added creature feature elements for good measure. Big Trouble in Little China failed to hit with audiences and critics during its theatrical release, yet has endured as a beloved cult classic and one of John Carpenter's best movies. Joining me today to talk about Big Trouble in Little China is Dan's touring and management company. Dan Delts Fan Experiences provides a full range of services, including high-class events, artist management, VIP dinners, exclusive celebrity experiences, and concerts. And you can go to dandelts.com.au to check out all things Dan Delts Fan Experiences. Recent tours include Bolo Young from Bloodsport. We got Daniel Bernhardt possibly on the radar coming out soon. We had Michael Jai White coming out. So many great people coming out through the Dan Delts Fan Experiences. I really recommend people check out the website and get involved, get a fan experience going. I mean, all indications is that this is a great way to meet your favorite martial arts or action stars from back in the day when we made great films, martial arts films, and genre films, just like Big Trouble in Little China. And Dan Deltz, I thank you so very much for joining me. How are you?
Awesome, mate. Thanks so much. Thanks for the invitation. It was really, really kind of you to have me on. Thanks for the great introduction. I work with my business partner Russell in TaylorMade Memorabilia, who does some awesome memorabilia and signing sessions, and we love movies together. And he has stores all around the country, and together Russell and I put these events and tours on, bringing out celebrities. I've been doing them for about 10 years, started in 2015. Actually, this is my 11th year with Dolph Lundgren, bringing Dolph to Australia for his very first Comic Con. And then from there it grew. And as you said, we brought out all the action guys that we grew up loving, brought out Jean-Claude Van Damme twice and Steven Seagal, and I've done Michael Jai twice. He's a good friend of mine. And then I brought out all the guys in between. We've had UFC fighters, GSP, and Anderson Silva, who have all done their own little bits and pieces in different movies. But all the action stars, Chuck Norris, Scott Atkins. Recently just had Jeff. This year's been a really big year. We brought out Jeff Speakman from The Perfect Weapon, and as you mentioned, the Back to the Future guys and Michael Jai White, and then Daniel Bernhardt's on the horizon. And I really appreciate the kind words. And the reason that I started doing it was because, you go to Comic Con and it's the same faces over and over. It's not that I
Mm.
never disliked Star Wars. I was never really into Star Trek, but it's very much a sci-fi crowd. And I've attended those events, and I've worked in conjunction with Supernova Comic Con predominantly as my partner in the con world in Australia. And shout out to Daniel at Supernova and Bill at Armageddon in Auckland. And it's quite regularly the same type of faces. And, you go up and get your autograph at the table, or you get a quick photo in the photo line in their professional photo booth. And there was no real chance to sit down and have a chat to the guys that we grew up loving. So I brought out the people that I started by bringing out the people that no one else wanted to bring out, and the people that I grew up loving. And then as time went on, I realized all the people that I had on my bedroom walls growing up, your Van Dams and your Segals and those types of guys, Dolph Lundgren, that other people, got inspired to do martial arts because of Jean-Claude, or Aikido because of Seagal, or bodybuilding because of Schwarzenegger or Stallone. And now it's turned into a huge thing, right? These guys get paid huge money to do Comic Cons and appearances all over the world. And we just find our niche and bring out the people that really want to come to Australia, or perhaps have never been. Seagal had never been. Uh, GSP had never been. John Travolta hadn't been for a long time. Van Damme hadn't been for 20 years. So yeah, it's been a great thing. But at heart, as you can see in the background, I'm a movie buff. There you go. So thanks for having me on, and excited to talk about Big Trouble. I have met Kurt Russell. He came out to promote The Hateful Eight.
Yep.
a number of years ago, and unfortunately, due to an overzealous security guard, I was at I think it was the project at the time, and didn't get a chance to get a photo with him, but got an autograph. I think it was in the middle of summer, and the pen failed on my um, Tango and Cash photo that I wanted. So I'm glad to see he's now doing a couple of Comic Cons and giving fans a chance to meet him. These guys, in many instances, are still making a lot of films and projects, but they don't really take the time out to see what their films and projects mean to people and what their careers have meant to people. And I think, having looked at interviews in the past and listened to podcasts on Big Trouble in Little China, I think that this was one that was not a success at the time at the box office, and has, as time has gone on, it has actually grown in popularity and become more and more successful, is if that's the right term, more and more loved. Whether it's someone like myself sharing it with my son, or people, now getting onto the toys because they're of an age like us where we work and have our own businesses and could never afford the figures. We now go back and buy the vintage laser discs or the vintage poster, and the legacy and the hype goes on, doesn't it? 40
It
years later.
does. It does. 40 years, yeah. It's really interesting how you brought up about how this movie, Big Trouble wasn't a critical or financial success in theaters. It was like I think home video and cable. That's where this movie really thrived. That's where I watched it for the first time. So,
Me too.
much like yourself, film buff, and when I grew up, I was watching a lot of the movies that my older brother would get from the video store, the good old video store. He had a video card. He was old enough to get all those great movies. Big Trouble in Little China is one of those movies he brings home. And it was so different because it's a mishmash of so many different things. You got the classic Western hero in Kurt Russell's Jack Burton, but he's kind of like a bit of a doofus in the
Cowboy.
movie. Yeah,
He's a cowboy. He's a clueless cowboy that kind of is he doesn't really like he's thrown into the mix, right? He's not like your typical Stallone or Schwarzenegger character that is full of muscles and they're hardened cop like a John McClane. And they're expecting the action and they're prepared for it. The guy's a truck driver, just doing his daily job, and he's a bit of a smart ass and has a great sense of humor, which everyone knows the lines and the classic one-liners when he's on the CB radio at the
mm,
start. Um, yeah, it's and like you, where I saw it for the first time was VHS. So I think the film came out in '86. I don't know if it came out on VHS in '86 or '87, but I would have been 10 or 11 years old at the time, living
same. Yep.
in my parents' home when we lived in a suburb in Melbourne called One Turner. And that's where I discovered videos and movies. I used to dub and tape films off the TV and get permission from my parents to watch what was back then called AO rating, which is adults only.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and I remember the local video store. I remember when Back to the Future came out on a VHS. Again, I would have been 10 or 11. And my cousin at the time had a hairdressing shop right next door to the video store. And I'll get her after she's finished her day at her studio to go and pick up this VHS for me and drop it off at home if mum couldn't get down there. And that's where I discovered Big Trouble in Little China. And like you, watching it for the first time, like it was insane. It wasn't like Star Wars or Indiana Jones that was in that same kind of era, where it was a sci-fi film or it was an adventure film. This was a combination of everything. And I think the only experience that I had like it in recent memory, well, it's not even recent, but in '96 when Robert Rodriguez and George Clooney did From Dusk Till Dawn, where
Right.
you're watching a road film and then halfway through it becomes a vampire film and you don't even recognize the switch. You're like, hang on, I was watching this, road film with these, two brothers that were escapees and robbers causing mayhem, and now you're watching a vampire film. And Big Trouble in Little China reminds me a lot of that. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
I see what you mean. I mean, the part that just got hooked me is like you're watching it, and at first it looks like it might be like a buddy comedy kind of thing with him and Kurt Russell, and then it's done, and then you got the street gangs, and when they take that sharp right turn in the truck and I go down that alley, and all of a sudden it's like martial arts
That's the
mayhem.
switch.
And then the
That was
three
the switch.
storms come down. And I'm
Yeah,
like, holy shit, what am I watching here? And it
yeah,
turns into just like this supernatural, kind of like a mix of like modern Western with monkey magic and all this kind of stuff in between. And then you got the John Carpenter part of it, which is like the whole creature features thing. You got monsters and you got all this stuff. And it kind of
yeah,
blends together. And so in one way, you're like, I kind of understand where people didn't really take to it because it was just so out there compared to everything
yeah.
else.
It
But
wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't a film that you could put in the box. And
no,
I think from the research that I did, knowing about the history of the film and knowing obviously some of John Carpenter's movies, and you and I were talking earlier, someone I've just started talking to, and one who I'm looking at bringing out actually did a John Carpenter movie, which we didn't discuss, which was Natasha Henstridge did Ghosts of Mars. Uh,
yes,
which I never really got into, and I never really got into a lot of John Carpenter's films. I know that Escape from New York originally was big at the time. I was working at Blockbuster when Escape from LA came out, and I wasn't really blown away by that. And then I went back to rewatch the original, and I can see the charm of it and why it's got its hardcore fan base. But again, they were films that never resonated with me. For me, John Carpenter's masterpiece was Big Trouble in Little China, but it wasn't appreciated at the time because you couldn't put it in a box. It wasn't a sci-fi film, and it wasn't an adventure film, and it wasn't a buddy comedy. It was a combination of all of them. And I think probably when the studio, I think if it was 20th Century Fox,
yeah,
went to release it, it was one of those films that they probably didn't know how to market properly.
yeah.
And when a studio doesn't know how to market the film, then it's going to be hard to find a reception because usually the trailers are maybe a mishmash of too many things. Sometimes they're better off, while we don't like it, is that they're better off just picking a lane and sticking to it so it finds an action audience or a sci-fi audience, and then hope the word of mouth grows. But yeah, I can see why they had trouble marketing it because it was just so many things and so all over the place, but that's what makes it special.
Well, this goes all the way back. The history of this is really interesting. So it goes all the way back to 1982. You've got these screenwriters, Gary Goldman and David Weinstein. So, like John Carpenter himself, they were big fans of kind of like the Eastern kind of invasion of martial arts films that were coming into America, like in the late 70s, early 80s. And I love movies like Five Fingers of Death and all that. So they come up with this idea where they can get kind of like the Chinese fantasy elements within an American movie. Originally, though, the movie was written as a classic Western. So, like the Jack Burton character was literally was a cowboy, and then you had the Chinese elements in there through like Chinese people worked on the railroads and such. So they optioned that script. 20th Century Fox kind of like it, but they're like, we need something else here. There's something else that we need to, to bring to really sell this. So they're bringing this other guy. His name is W.D. Rickner. He directed this film. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It came out in '84. I think it was called The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. Came
I
out
know the film, never
kind of
seen
like a
it.
sci-fi cult movie itself. He has the idea of like, let's get rid of the Western aspect and let's set it in modern day. So that's where he's the one who's like, let's put it in modern day, kind of like, San Francisco, Chinatown. But the idea of this initially being a Western, what do you think? You reckon that could have been pulled off like a classic Western movie with those kind of Chinese mythical kind of elements in there? I don't know, man. I think it might have been
No,
maybe too much for people to handle.
no, I think they've made the right choice changing it. I mean, you got to look at the I guess the theaters at the time and the kind of movies that were coming out at the time. I can't really think of in the 80s when there were any successful Western films, but you had
Yeah.
all of the Star Wars films and the Indiana Jones films and the Star Trek films. And I think, a mistake that a lot of producers make, even today, there's films coming out now that you see the trailer for it and you're like, I don't know who the audience for this is because Christopher Nolan, one of the greatest filmmakers in recent memory. The Batmans to me aren't the Batmans as good as Burton's Batman and Batman Returns, but obviously they were hugely successful when he did the Batman trilogy. Now he's got the Odyssey coming out, which is that Viking Troy era. And are people going to see it because it's a Christopher Nolan film and hoping it's huge? or are they actually really interested in the subject matter? And there's many trailers where I've seen a film when you go, I don't really know who the audience for this is. Well, I know it's not me when I see the
Mm.
trailer. And I think now, if you want to take it because of COVID, or the convenience of Netflix or being able to watch on our big screen TVs or our home theaters, or it's the cost of living, that people have got a lot more options. So kids aren't into movies the way that we were because we had video stores and VHS. We didn't have the internet and we didn't have PlayStation. We didn't have Xbox. We didn't have Nintendo DS. We didn't have a million different options to distract us. And entertain us. Whereas now you do. So everyone's fighting, and as a tour promoter, we're in the same boat. Everyone's fighting for that entertainer's dollar, that entertainment dollar of the fan base. People have only got so much money, and so I think when they make these kind of films, they've got to stick to what they think is going to attract a crowd. And I think they made the right decision. I don't think a Western would have worked. Although there's still those nods, Jack's got the cowboy boots in there,
John
and he's a
Wayne, very
bit,
John Wayne
yeah,
performance
he's
in
very,
there.
and so
Yeah.
maybe that was the nod to it to keep those elements into the original script. But I think when you see a film to me as crazy and as mishmash as Big Trouble in Little China, that at the time people didn't really appreciate, but they did as time went on. I think they made it work, and I think exactly as you said, that turn into the alleyway. And I'm a big film location buff. I'm actually doing a tour next year in Hong Kong of locations from Bloodsport and Into the Dragon and Double Impact, and taking fans to meet the filmmakers and the writers of those films. Is that I've always wanted to go to San Francisco and do the locations of Big Trouble in Little China.
Right.
And that turning point when the semi trailer is in the alleyway and Jack has stopped and the guys come down from the sky, lightning and all the rest of it. It was like, what is this? But I think even the opening, when you had the gentleman doing the interview at the start, I know that was an afterthought. I think the studio included that to give some clarity to who Jack Burton was. Um, you know, it gave me a very Gremlins and Goonies vibe. It just, when you were watching it, there was something about it that made you feel like this is going to be cool. And you just felt like you're in for something special. I don't know what the right word or indication was, but it felt like with the opening and the music and the wisecracks that we're in for a special.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you will love. And that special ride is a big reason for that is John Carpenter. He's at an interesting point in his career when he takes on the movie. He just did a film called Starman. I don't know if you remember that film with Jeff Bridges, and Jeff Bridges actually got an Oscar nomination for that. So Carpenter is like in a position in his career where he's probably as big as he would ever be. Halloween, he's already established that. The Thing, even though it didn't do good box office wise, started doing well on video. Starman does really good stuff as well, both critically and financially. So he's introduced to the script for Big Trouble in Little China, which at this point, Richter has done 10 weeks of just like, he pretty much started from scratch. He like took the basic elements and redid everything. And John Carpenter's, like as I mentioned before, huge fan of Kung Fu movies. Five Fingers of Death, he said that he watched in 1973. He also mentioned movies like Zoo Warriors from Magic Mountain. He talked about how the Three Storms were modeled after the samurais in Lone Wolf and Cub. And so he loved all that kind of stuff. And then he presents it to Kurt Russell. And Carpenter and Russell, I think, are like one of the great kind of director actor kind of combos. You mentioned before Escape from New York, and then after that they do The Thing, and this will be their third collaboration together. And Kurt Russell, absolutely loved wanting to take part of this because one of the things he really liked about this, and we kind of mentioned this before, is that he's a guy who doesn't know he's the sidekick, but he is the sidekick, but his ego is kind of so big, he doesn't really understand that. And that's something I really appreciate about the film as well, is that the character, yes, he is brave. He is, he does get involved in stuff, but he doesn't. He's not kicking ass as much as like the Dennis Dunn character is. He's the one with the martial arts skills. It isn't Kurt Russell out there. And Kurt Russell said, "It's like I can't do that stuff, but I can do this. This is what I can do. I can come in and I can do my John Wayne impression, and I can talk tough, and I can have my gun, and I can do all this stuff, but I can have fun with it." And I think
Yeah,
that's at the time, especially when you have your Stallones and Schwarzeneggers really commanding, kind of like the action star is the guy you're there to watch. He's the one doing that stuff. I think it's a bit of a ballsy move from Kurt Russell's part to say, I have no qualms whatsoever being the comedic relief here,
yeah,
because the joke is the guy doesn't know he is the comedic relief, and I think that works really
yeah.
well.
I agree. Yep, I agree. I thought he was awesome in it, and he's been someone who's never really been afraid to take risks with his career. I
Yeah,
mean, you have a look at all the things that he's done where he did, as you mentioned, The Thing, and then went into this, and then went into doing drama with Tequila Sunrise, and then he did action with Tango and Cash. One of my favorite movies of him from all time is Breakdown, where
yeah,
where he was. Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies. I'm so glad we were one of the first countries to get a 4K release of that movie. I saw it in the theaters. It blew me away, and I still watch it at home, and I just still love it. And it's a guy who just wants to find his wife. And it was a character driven piece that had the thriller and the action elements. But he's not an action star. He's an actor who knows how to do action, and I
yeah.
think there's a very big difference. Some people, your Segals and your Van Dams, uh, people know what they want and they play to their strengths, and they're great in those roles. But they're martial artists or they're action guys that do acting. Versus there are people that are actors, experienced thespian actors that can do action. And that's what I love about movies is that there's a place and time for everyone and everything, and that's what makes
Yeah.
it so great that we've got so many different type of action films and action roles. But yeah, but the star power, I mean, you got the star power of Kurt Russell, you got the star power of Kim Cattrall, you got Carter Wong, who had done a lot of films in Asia, and I'm assuming Kurt brought him in because he was a martial artist and he had a relationship with Bruce Lee back in the day as well. So Carter Wong, um, and together, and you go in there and you look at some of the people, even just the extended cast that went on to do huge things. The James Loos of the world, and Al Leong, and all of these Asian martial arts action stars that went on to have a lot bigger roles in different films in the late 80s and early 90s. It was just something about it that just made it so special.
One thing that's really interesting about this film is that there's a bit of a race to get the film done, because while Big Trouble in Little China is brewing with 20th Century Fox over at Paramount, there's another movie that has very similar themes called The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy. Very similar in that it's action adventure that follows a California man who gets drawn into a plot involving Chinese mysticism. And when you think about it, there is a lot of stuff there in between them. So they had to try to get Big Trouble in China on screen in production before they can get before so they can beat the Golden Child to the punch here essentially. And like Carpenter, like later on, be like, who would think that like both of these movies would be like, coming into production at the same time. So I thought that was really interesting there. Um, Speaking of some of the cast are in here, Dennis Dunn, I want to talk about him. He plays Wang Chi, so he's like the I guess you could say he's kind of like the co-lead in the movie alongside Kurt Russell. He's kind of like Jack's friend. He's the one whose fiance is kidnapped by David Lopan. The girl with the green eyes, Mao Ying. He was at the time a very known actor in San Francisco, but he's more of a stage actor. Him and Victor Wong like did a lot of kind of like stage acting and stuff like that as well. This was only his second film. Um, and not only that, he didn't know martial arts. He did a little bit of it during the time when he was a kid. So he had to be kind of taught how to do martial arts in this movie. And I think we had to go to now like one of the biggest kind of like guys that we were talking, and you mentioned before, James Liu. Was a martial arts coordinator on this movie. He also
Yeah,
plays one of the main kind of like good guys in the movie. Usually throughout the film, he does that kind of that
yeah,
symbol that they do for the thing. He's got the yellow sash and all that. He did a lot of the choreography in this movie. I think he's kind of like the guy who really kind of made it really work, because John Carpenter, of course, could be a fan of that stuff, but he doesn't really know how to kind of like do
Yeah, do
action
it.
scenes in that facet. You need someone like a James Liu to come in and do that kind of stuff. And he does a fantastic job in this movie because even when watching it again recently, it's like, sure, you got movies now like The Raid and everything have just really taken a lot of that stuff and made it really brutal and all that. But I still find that the martial arts scenes in this movie still hold up. The way they're shot, the way they're choreographed, the sound effects, everything else. I really enjoyed that aspect of the movie, and I don't think it's aged. I think it's aged really well over time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And James Liu's a legend and went on to do huge things. And yeah, like you mentioned, there's just so many different aspects of the film. The monkey magic aspect,
Yep.
the kung fu aspect, the cowboy aspect, and altogether just makes it a great adventure film. And at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants, right? The film is entertaining, it's funny, it has action, there's peril. There's the rescue of the damsel in distress, which we don't
Yes.
really get much of these days. And altogether, it just works, and it's a great adventure. And as you mentioned, you had where I think a lot of the budget went was into the monsters and the creatures and the floating head. Is that the floating head, or it's a head full of eyeballs? I remember that.
Both. It's kind of like both. It's like a floating head with eyeballs, so you got both right.
And I imagine that back in the day that would have been a really expensive prop because that was not CGI. I just remember it distinctly that the eyeballs move in all different directions. So I'm assuming that would have been an animatronic and that would have been pretty expensive to make and produce on a film that probably wasn't the world's big. I mean, it's not a small budget film, but not a huge budget film.
Another cast member in here we need to talk about is the legendary James Hong, who plays the role of David
Of course.
Lopan. This year, 97 years old, still acting. He's still doing roles. He was only just in recently Everything Everywhere All at Once. First time in all of his years, by the way, with that film that he's ever been at the Oscars. By the way, it was the
Yeah,
first time he ever
crazy.
went to the Oscar ceremony,
Absolutely
which is
crazy.
fantastic. And he's
Yeah.
great in this movie. He said, and when he talks about playing like David Lopan, he said that at that time he had 50 years in the industry. He was doing like 10 feature films or 10 TV appearances per year. And that really schooled him to be able to play multiple characters because there's different versions of Lopan. You got the old man Lopan, you got the decrepit guy, kind of like the really cheeky decrepit guy in the wheelchair. You got the 7 foot tall guy, like warrior kind of guy, and then you get the young Lopan at the end. So he's playing all these different versions of him. And it's really interesting how he says that not only was it great that his experience playing so many different roles can bring about this role in there, but I think it's like for this guy who's had 100 something credits, maybe even more. To this day, I think it stands as probably his most known role as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's a kudos to him, but just the stuff that he brings to it. He does bring a humor, he brings a gravitas, but at the same time, he brings a danger to it as well. And I think that's what you need in your head villain. He does a really great job here.
Yeah, he was evil, and and again that's something that we really lack these days is a genuine bad guy. Do you know what I mean? Like he played that guy that wanted the damsel to give him the youth and to live on forever and take over the world type of thing, and you actually really felt it. You felt the risk there, which I think is what makes it work so well. And then on top of that, he's a great actor in general.
Yep.
And when you have the ability of the actor with the film that they're in addition to the costume and the makeup and the performance and altogether he's just awesome in this. He's a great guy, great bad guy. I mean, he's in some of my favorite movies. He was the bad guy in Tango and Cash, and as I mentioned earlier, I recently had out Jeff Speakman, whose
Mm,
biggest film, Perfect Weapon, and he was the bad guy in The Perfect Weapon as
he
well.
was. Yep.
He just, he's been around for so long. I mean, Tango, Big Trouble in Little China was 86, Tango and Cash was 89,
Yep.
Perfect Weapon was 91. And then if you go back and look at his filmography, I can guarantee you we could pick at least another 5 or 10 roles of his that we will know off the top of our heads, where he
Mm.
just he just was such a great actor, and someone I really would love to have brought out. Is probably getting a little bit on in age now where he can travel long distances. But yeah, it would be awesome to meet
Yeah,
before he goes.
he was in Blade Runner, he was in Chinatown. He for a lot of the younger kids out there, he did the voice of Jack Black's father in the Kung Fu Panda movies. He did a lot of voice work, TV. He's done pretty much everything you can imagine he's done. And Lopan, I still think though he's like the best thing
Yeah,
he has put
yeah,
put on there, and it's just kudos to him as a just a great being a great multifaceted actor. You mentioned
agreed.
before about the floating head with the eyeball. So the person who did the creature effects is a guy named Steve Johnson. He talked about how number one, it was great working with James Hong because James Hong, you imagine he had to do the whole kind of like regalia and everything like that. So it was great doing that kind of stuff. But he also talked about the floating head eyeball, about how difficult it was to make that. So he said was they made basically an animatronic puppet. So it's real, this thing that they actually made. So they had all these motors in it. So the eyes all had to have upper and lower blinks. Some of the eyeballs were actually on stalks, which could retract into it and when you poke it. And then you had the face and the mouth and the tongue, all of these motors and stuff that are in there. So they actually made this thing on there, which is something I love about this era of
Cool.
filmmaking.
That's what we're saying.
Practical.
Practical
Love
effects,
it.
yeah, not CGI and not special effects, and it stands out and it's obvious. Unless a film like a Star Wars or something had a really big budget at the time, and you had a filmmaker, whether it was lucked out or just the right people in the production, is that some of those films 40, 50 years later, the special effects and the animatronics like Jaws still stand up today. Whereas might watch let's pick a film that's very blue screen heavy, a Star Wars Episode 2 or 3, while it was still George Lucas, just the tech at the time got dated, and some of those newer films actually date more than the older films because it just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't look genuine, or it doesn't look real, or the lighting doesn't bounce correctly, and it's obvious that it's a blue screen. And so I think when you've got practical effects, the film always dates better, and you get a better performance out of the actor because the thing is there in front of them to act off, as opposed to them holding up a ping pong ball on a stick saying, pretend that this is here type of thing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I knew that would have been an issue because you can tell that all of those different eyeballs blinking and looking at different directions are on different motors. And like anything which is mechanical, those things tend to break down. So, I can imagine it would have been quite a difficult process to use it. At the same time, I guarantee you that they probably would have had some issues and maintenance and repairs. I wonder if that prop is still out there in the world today and who owns it and what kind of condition it's in. That would be really cool to look up.
That would be really cool to lock up. It would be really cool to kind of scare people, have them open the door to your living room and then just have like a big head with eyeballs just poking out everywhere. If you could get it
Yeah,
to
I
work, it'd
wonder
be
who
even
owns it.
better.
It's probably in some rich kid's cabinet because I know guys out there that collect a lot of film props. It was
Right.
too expensive a hobby for me. But yeah, yeah, that would be great to look up, see if it's still survived in one piece and who has it today. But yeah, like as we said, or yeah, you got the James Hong, you've got the eyeball and the puppetry as the evilness. You've got the Carter Wong with the exploding head and body when he gets furious.
Mm.
So many elements of that movie are ridiculous, but somehow work, right?
They sure do. And if I was going to have any prop from that movie, though, I want Jack Burton's tank top that he wears throughout the movie. Put
Yes,
that in the frame somewhere. That'll be awesome to have. I
would
love
be.
to have that for
Be worth
sure.
it.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. So production of this movie, Big Trouble in Little China, starts in 1985, 7th of October 1985. So they actually do film some scenes in San Francisco. So at the time, whenever people did stuff in San Francisco, they never did it there. They did everywhere else. But they actually did film in San Francisco, in Chinatown, for a few scenes. Majority of the stuff was actually done on a 20th Century Fox Studios, kind of like on set kind of stuff. So a budget was $18 million there to bring it in. There was a little bit of a hiccup though. So you have the Asian Pacific Media Group at the time. They were very concerned about the movie because they thought that just looking at it in face value, that it was going to be Kurt Russell as the main hero kind of guy, and everyone else is just going to be a bunch of lackeys and very stereotyped and all that kind of stuff. Little did they know that Kurt Russell's kind of like the joke in the film, right? And everyone else is kind of like the heroes in the movie. The reason why they were so pissed off though is because there was a movie that came out in 1985 called Year of the Dragon. It starred Mickey Rourke. It was
Yep.
directed by Michael Cimino, also best set in Chinatown, and it pissed off a lot of people in the Asian American community, this movie. So they were like on edge, like anything that kind of came along, like they were gonna like make sure that like
Offend it.
nothing was
Didn't want to
exactly.
offend people. Mm.
Exactly. So Dennis Dunn, who's in the film, said that he understood the concerns that people had, but he also said that like throughout the whole movie, like he always talked to John Carpenter, and you could tell just by talking to him, there's like there is no way there's going to be anything disparaging to made about any Asians American anything. And not only that, he said that he's been on sets before where he felt like a second-class citizen, but on this movie, on Big Trouble in Little China, you felt like you were part of a team. And I
Mm.
think that's really essential for people to understand for this movie too, is that just Carpenter had like just so much reverence for his cast and the type of filmmaking he's making, and he knew very well the elements that he was coming in and kind of putting together was going to be maybe controversial to some people in different communities, but for him it was like a tribute to a lot of these things. That's what it seems like to me in this movie. A lot of the filmmakers and the writers and such, they love Eastern martial arts cinema of the of the 70s and early 80s and such, and this is like their tribute to them. Because in Western filmmaking at the time, a lot of the action scenes, you don't see that kind of martial arts kind of stuff. It will be like 86 onwards. That's where you kind of see the influence that those movies had on people like the Van Dams and later the Seagulls and other kind of actors and such going on
Yeah,
then on.
Jackie Chan was
Jackie
finding his
Chan.
way.
Exactly. And but prior to that, you didn't see wild fighting, that's for sure. All of that kind of stuff that it didn't just wild
No.
fighting, the flying in the air. That was stuff that was coming from the eastern side of cinema. So when you see it here, and that's why I think we all loved it as well. This
Yeah,
was
I'd
new
never
to
seen
us.
it.
We didn't see anything like it, and that's
Yeah,
what's so
it's
cool
new.
about this film. Yeah.
Exactly. It was new and fresh, and you're right. Like really from that Bruce Lee era of the early to mid '70s, and then when Bruce passed, there was the Bruce Ploitation they call it, where they did all the Bruce Lee knockoffs and Bruce Lee and Bruce Lowe and all of those types of things. And then there was a real quiet period in that early '80s, and that's when you start to have the emergence of Jackie Chan and Jet Li in the later '80s of Once Upon a Time in China
Yeah.
and
Toy
those
Story and
types
all
of
that.
movies. You
Yeah.
started having Chow Yun-fat come out with the Better Tomorrow films and all the rest of it. So it's one of those films where it was just an era when there was not a lot of films that were available, and you had a lot of people that were you know that era where people were not making those types of films. When you got to the late '80s and early '90s, that's where they really found their footing with the Jet Li, the Jackie Chans, young Donnie Yen. So up until that point, we had no Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. We had no Once Upon a Time in China. And so to see the wire work on film with some kung fu, with the Asian flavor, with the American kind of jive and cowboyisms. It was really, really fresh and exciting at the time.
Another thing we have to mention that's great about this film is the music. John Carpenter, Alan and Howarth were the composers for this film. Carpenter composes his films, and I don't know if you see now, he does that now. He doesn't do films, but he does concerts, live concerts. He does soundtracks from his movies. He gets on stage and does all that stuff. He also wrote the theme song, "Big Trouble in Little China," that very memorable theme song that
Yes.
ends the movie. His band, the Coup de Vils, did the music video for the song as well, and the video came out before the motion picture did. Um, Speaking of the release, so it's really interesting in that Kurt Russell said that pre-screenings for the movie was actually quite good, and they were kind of convinced like, hey, we might have a hit here. I saw interviews with King Cattrall, and she was speaking very confidently about, yes, I believe we could do a sequel for this and such and all that. But the film comes out. So remember, budget 18 million. It grosses only 11.1 million dollars.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even scratch to bring back its money there. And a lot of the critics, I think their problem with the film was like the stuff that we liked about the film. It was
Yeah.
just too much of everything. But that's what we liked about it. But then I just don't think people were kind of ready for it. It was kind of ahead of its
Yeah, they
time in
were.
many ways.
It was ahead of its time, and people really didn't get it, and people weren't ready for it. And I'm really glad that it found an audience. I'm really glad that it found an audience on home video, and then really lived on. I mean, when everyone back in those days, in the late '80s, mid '80s, late '80s, brought movies into their home, you then share it with your wife and your kids, your next door neighbor. You have family members come over if they didn't yet have VCRs. You would say, "Hey, mate, have you seen that?" And then those people would go and get it at the video store. So, I mean, I remember that era very well because in the early '90s, I was working in Blockbuster Video, and I
Mm,
later went on to become a manager at Blockbuster in my last years of high school and my university years. And you would always recommend to people those hidden gems that maybe weren't a big hit at the box office, and word of mouth gets out, right? I mean, one of the greatest, considered one of the greatest movies of all time, The Shawshank Redemption, flopped at the box office,
yeah.
and it's in people's top three or four films ever made in the history of film. Yet did nothing at the theater because they couldn't market it properly. Morgan Freeman and the other gentleman,
Tim
just the names,
Robbins.
Tim Robbins. Maybe not the biggest of star power at that time, or it was the subject matter of two guys being in a prison. Again, or one of those reasons, all those reasons combined, is that it wasn't a film that people were looking for. But on home video, everyone said, "You've got to go see this." One person picks up, "You've got to see this film," and then word of mouth, and then the movies live on. And that was the benefit that we had a Big Trouble in Little China, is that 40 years later, we're still doing YouTube interviews and podcasts about it, and it's being released on DVD and Laserdisc and Blu-ray, and then a box set of the Blu-ray. And if film buffs like us go onto YouTube and discover interviews that we'd never seen for the first time, and you find people that go to film locations and match up the shots, and it just lives on and on. And one thing I'm surprised about, that it hasn't come out on 4K yet. And
Mm.
as a movie collector and a 4K lover, give us this movie on 4K, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, this year's 40 years. You imagine that it would be a really good time. If it was
Yeah,
me, if I had like the powers of the universe to do stuff like this, I would have re-released it for a limited theatrical, and then
yeah,
with the 4K print, and then release the Blu-ray afterwards.
well,
I don't know why
makes
sometimes
sense.
people just drop the ball with this stuff. I don't get it
Yeah.
myself.
Yep. And sometimes the powers that be at studios are business people, and they might be, the current generation of Gen Z people that just don't get it and don't understand it. And maybe, people like you and I should be in charge of distribution companies and studios, because we're film buffs and we live and breathe these films, and we know them very, very well, and we know what people want and what people love. But that's we can only control what we control, right? We can't control everything, but
That's
we can talk
true.
about it.
We can, and not only that, we can enjoy a lot of the stuff. There's a lot of the fruits of Big Trouble in Little China that still happen. So back in 2012, I don't know if you know this, there was a Gangnam Style parody video called Low Pan Style that went viral on YouTube. It was done by this guy called Weki J. His name's Wesley Freitas. He's only done 3 videos, but one of the biggest ones he did was called Low Pan Style. And not only does he like dress like David Lopan and do Lopan style and all that, but people from the actual cast is in there. For example, James Hong features in the movie, features in
Wow.
the clip as well. So he's doing
There you
Lopan
go. I
style
didn't know
with
that.
everyone else.
I'm going to have to
I,
watch it.
I'm gonna put the link in the show notes. And I'm gonna send it to you as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
2018, there was a comic book, a graphic novel that was written by John Carpenter called Big Trouble in Little China, Old Man Jack. So it's kind of like a sequel where we see the Jack Burton's next adventure. The year is 2020. Hell is literally on Earth. Ching Dai, sick of relying on screw-ups like David Lopan to do his bidding, has broken the barriers between Earth and the infinite hells, and a 60-year-old Jack Burton in his little tiny corner of Florida has to be the one to save the world. So there's actual comic
Wow.
book graphic novel of this as well,
I
which I
need to
found
get
really
that.
great.
I need to have you got it?
I haven't. I only just found out about this when I was doing my research. I need to get my
Wow, there
hands
you
on this
go.
as well.
I'm going to be looking that
Finally,
up. Right, it is.
something we can talk about with this. Did you know that in 2015 that Dwayne The Rock Johnson was actually signed up to do a sequel to this? At first,
Yes.
people did say it was a remake, but it wasn't a remake, but it turned to a sequel. But it went nowhere because I think the rights, a lot of the rights stuff with 20th Century Fox, they just couldn't clear a lot of stuff with it. I'm kind of
I'm
happy they
glad.
didn't do
I'm
this
glad.
because
I'm
I don't
glad
want
it
to
didn't
see,
happen.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't happen. I mean, I love The Rock in certain roles. I think The Rock's greatest roles were his early films, like The Rundown and Walking Tall, and I think Snitch was another good one.
yeah,
But a lot of the stuff he's done in recent years is all same, same. And yeah, there's certain films just don't need to be remade. Like, I mean, they're talking now about remaking Bloodsport.
yeah,
Um, it just can't be done. It's like, can they remake it? No, Bruce Lee made Into the Dragon. Van Damme and the cast and the soundtrack and the era made Bloodsport, and the low budgetness of it made Bloodsport what it was. And then how many times over the years have the studios tried? They did a Total Recall remake with Colin Farrell, that failed. They
yep,
did a Conan remake with Jason Momoa, that
fail.
failed. They've
Hmm.
done Terminator films without Arnold in it, they failed. You just leave. Yeah, they recently did The Running Man with
Glen Powell, yeah,
Glenn Powell, right? And I saw that in the theaters. Okay, didn't hate it, but it's not the original Running Man. And
no,
certain times it's like, while some of these actors, like while Schwarzenegger is still around, why not do King Conan? While
mm,
Schwarzenegger is still around, why not do a Conan a Running Man sequel? With him in it, but he may not be the starring role, and I get it. He's older, but they've just done a cliffhanger remake without Stallone in it, and there was this
yeah,
talk about Stallone having a cameo, and then that ended up going nowhere. So yeah, I'm glad that Rock sequel didn't happen, or that reboot, and that movie should remain untouched. And I don't think when films are that loved, and fans are that protective of it, there's just no way of touching it. And
and
from my research, is most of those remakes and reboots and sequels without the original cast never make money financially. So I don't understand why they continue to do it. I mean, in some ways, they've found some success in those Scream legacy films where they call it a sequel and a reboot at the same time, where they've got some legacy cast members in there. They did it recently with I Know What You Did Last Summer. That didn't really work. Um, that just doesn't work, mate. Like, let's just leave it and let people appreciate and love what they loved about it, and that's what I think they should do. But yeah, I need to wrap it up. So if you've got an outro that you want to do, because I've just got
yep,
a medical appointment in 15
I
minutes. I
know.
need to leave in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. They got to leave it as it is. I mean, you mentioned before Escape from LA, even though it had Russell and Carpenter, didn't work out. And I think this movie is perfect as is. 40 years on from Big Trouble in Little China, Kurt Russell, John Carpenter, James Liu, James Hong, so many great people in this movie. Still stands up the test of time 40 years
Yeah,
afterwards. And
absolutely.
and Dan Delts, thank you so very much for your time
Awesome,
today
mate.
to
Thanks for
talk all this
having me
stuff.
on. Give us the 4K studios, whoever you are, MGM, whoever the studio rights holder is. Give us the 4K. We want it. We're ready for it. And now I'm about to go off and I'm about to find that old man Burton comic book.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.